The sun is moving, not toward the horizon, not at the pace of mercy. It is sliding, degree by degree, minute by minute, toward the edge of the world, and if it falls, everything is lost. The army of Israel is in the middle of a battle they did not start. 5 kings, 5 armies. A coalition of Amorite warlords who woke up this morning and decided to crush the city of Gibeon, a city that had made peace with Joshua, a city now screaming for help. Joshua's forces have marched through the night. They came out of Gilgal at midnight, climbed the hills of Judah in darkness, and hit the Amorite alliance at dawn like a fist through stone. The enemy is broken. They are running, scattered across the descent of Beth Horon, stumbling down the pass, bleeding, desperate to escape into the trees before nightfall covers their retreat. And here is the problem. Night is coming. In the ancient world, battle does not continue after dark. The terrain is too dangerous. The men are too exhausted. The line between friend and enemy disappears into shadow. And these 5 kings, these 5 men who have butchered and burned and scattered, if they reach darkness, they survive. If they survive, they regroup. If they regroup, they come back. And next time, they will not make the mistake of fighting in the open. Joshua looks at the sky. He has spent his entire adult life learning one thing. When God speaks, you obey. When God says march, you march. When God says be silent, you hold your breath. When God says go, you go, even if what God is asking has never been done, never been imagined, never been attempted by any living creature on this earth. And so Joshua does something no human being has ever done. He opens his mouth and he speaks to the sun, not to God, not a prayer, a command. Spoken in front of his entire army, in front of the enemy, in front of the watching universe. Sun, stand still over Gibeon. And you, moon, over the valley of Aijalon. And the sun stands still. This is the story of Joshua, the warrior who bent time. The man who obeyed when obedience was impossible, who marched when marching made no sense, who trusted when trust required the suspension of every natural law ever written into the fabric of creation. But before we get back to that battlefield, before we watch the sky freeze and the army of the Lord sweep its enemies into oblivion, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to start with the grave. The wailing begins at dusk. It moves through the camp of Israel like a wave, tent to tent, voice to voice, until 2 million people are on their knees in the dust of Moab, and the sound of their grief is something the desert has never heard before. Moses is dead. Think about what that sentence means. Moses, the man who stood before Pharaoh when no one else could stand. The man who stretched out his hand over the Red Sea and watched the water split like a curtain. The man who climbed Sinai while it burned and came back down carrying the law of God on his face and in his arms. The man who was so close to the Almighty that his skin glowed, literally, physically radiated light after being in the divine presence. Moses is dead, and Joshua son of Nun stands at the edge of that grief and feels something he has never felt before in 40 years of following the greatest leader the world has ever produced. He is alone. Not physically, he is surrounded by 2 million people. But the weight of what has just been handed to him is a different kind of solitude. Every man who has ever led knows it. You can be in a crowd and still be the only person carrying the thing you carry. Joshua has watched Moses his entire adult life. He was Moses' aide, his military commander, his apprentice in leadership. He was one of the 12 spies sent into Canaan 4 decades ago, one of the only 2 who came back saying, "We can take it." God is with us. He has seen miracles that would shatter a modern mind into pieces. He has eaten manna that fell from the sky. He has drunk from water that gushed out of solid rock. He has watched a pillar of fire lead an entire nation through absolute darkness. And now the pillar is gone. The voice is gone. The man who spoke face to face with God is in an unmarked grave on the mountain of Nebo, buried by God Himself, the only human being in history whose funeral was conducted by the divine. Israel is in mourning for 30 days. 30 days of sitting in ash and remembering. 30 days of not moving, not planning, not crossing anything. And then, on a day when the grief is still raw, when the tears have not fully dried, when the weight of Moses' absence is still a physical thing pressing on every chest in the camp, God speaks, not to the whole nation, not with thunder or fire or a disembodied voice rolling across the plain. He speaks to one man, quietly, directly, personally. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Arise, go, cross. 3 words. And embedded in them is a command that would make the bravest general on earth pause. The Jordan River is at flood stage. This is not a quiet stream you can wade across. At the time of Israel's crossing, the Jordan at flood is a churning, swollen, brown wall of water, sometimes 30 feet deep, cresting its banks, dangerous enough to kill animals and men who miscalculate it. And Israel needs to cross with 2 million people, with women, children, livestock, carts, tents, the Ark of the Covenant. But God is not asking for Joshua's assessment of the logistics. God is giving a command. And then God does something extraordinary. He doesn't just command, He promises. He says, "As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you." And then, 3 times in a single speech, God says the same 2 words, "Be strong and courageous." 3 times. Not twice. 3. In the ancient world, repetition is not accident. Repetition is emphasis. When a king says something 3 times, it is because the thing he is saying is more important than everything else combined. God is not simply issuing a military order. God is addressing something deeper, the terror that lives in the chest of every person who has ever been handed a mission larger than themselves. Joshua is afraid, not the kind of fear that makes you run, the kind of fear that lives quietly behind the eyes of capable people who understand exactly what they have been asked to do, the kind of fear that comes from knowing too much, from having watched Moses fail to enter the land, from having seen an entire generation die in the wilderness because they were too afraid to trust, from understanding that leadership is not just about winning, but about carrying everyone with you into the win. Be strong and courageous. God knows what Joshua is feeling, and God is not telling him to stop feeling it. He is telling him to feel it and cross the river anyway. Before Joshua gives a single military order, he tells his officers, "Prepare provisions. In 3 days you will cross this Jordan." 3 days, not 3 months. Not 3 years of planning and preparation and risk assessment. 3 days. Because the man of God has learned the first lesson of faith. You don't wait until the river looks crossable. You start moving while it still looks impossible. Before the army moves, 2 men slip out of the camp in darkness. No trumpets. No formal announcement. Just 2 men with dust on their sandals and intelligence missions in their eyes, crossing the Jordan quietly, moving toward the walled city that stands at the gateway to everything Israel needs to conquer, Jericho. It is impossible to overstate how ancient Jericho is. This is not simply a fortified city. This is the oldest continuously inhabited city on the surface of the earth, settled as far back as 9,000 years before the birth of Christ. 9,000 years. The walls that rise over this oasis in the Jordan Valley have been built and rebuilt, layer upon layer, century upon century, until they are not simply stone but history compressed into rock. Archaeologists who excavate Jericho find it in layers, civilization upon civilization, each one buried under the next. By the time Joshua's spies arrive, Jericho is protected by a double casemate wall system. An outer wall approximately 6 feet thick. An inner wall approximately 12 feet thick. Between them, a gap wide enough that houses could be built in it, extending from one wall to the other, suspended in the space between. The outer wall rises to a height of approximately 20 to 26 feet. Beneath it, a massive earthen rampart slopes steeply down to a moat. To assault this city, an attacking army would have to cross the moat, climb the rampart, breach the outer wall, cross the gap, and then breach the inner wall. All while defenders on top poured arrows, rocks, boiling oil, and spears down on their heads. The city of Jericho does not fear Joshua of Israel. They have heard about him. Word travels fast in the ancient Near East. Trader routes carry news faster than armies. They know about the Red Sea. They know about the wilderness wanderings. They know about the Amorite kings Sihon and Og, crushed by Israel in battle east of the Jordan. And the Bible records something astonishing. The people of Jericho are terrified. Their hearts have melted like water. The fear of Israel's God has been running ahead of the army like a herald. But fear and surrender are different things. Jericho locks its gates. The two spies arrive in the city and find their way to a house built into the outer wall. The house of a woman named Rahab. She is a prostitute. The Bible does not soften this fact. In the ancient world, this means she is a woman at the absolute bottom of the social hierarchy, used, discarded, invisible to the powerful, noticed only when she is convenient. Her house is in the wall itself, the classic location for those who live on the margins of a society, those who cannot afford land inside the city's heart. But Rahab is not what her address suggests. The king of Jericho finds out about the spies almost immediately. His intelligence network is faster than Joshua anticipated. He sends soldiers to Rahab's house. She has hidden the men under bundles of flax drying on her rooftop. She looks the king's soldiers in the eye and she lies. The soldiers believe her. They run toward the fords of the Jordan, and Rahab climbs to her roof. What happens next is one of the most extraordinary conversations in the entire Hebrew Bible. This woman, a pagan, a prostitute, a resident of a city under divine judgment, sits on her rooftop in the dark and speaks theology. She tells the spies, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, for we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites. As soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, for the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. The Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." This woman has never met Moses. She has never stood at Sinai. She has never heard the voice of God or eaten manna or watched a pillar of fire. She has only heard stories, second-hand accounts, traders' gossip, the whisper of terrified people. And from those stories alone, she has arrived at a theological conclusion that the entire generation of Israel that died in the wilderness failed to reach. This God is real, and He is serious, and He wins. She asks for one thing, not treasure, not escape, not a position in the Israelite court. She asks for her family, and the spies make the promise. Then they give her a cord, a scarlet cord, to hang in her window as a signal. In Hebrew, the word for cord is tikva, and tikva also means hope. Let that land. They give Rahab a scarlet cord, hope, and tell her to hang it in her window. The color matters too. Scarlet, red, the color of blood. In the ancient world, and specifically in Israel's religious vocabulary, scarlet is the color of sacrifice. It is the color of Passover blood on the doorpost that made death pass over a household. Rahab hangs a scarlet cord in her window, and without knowing the full theology of it, she is participating in the same logic. This blood, this hope, will mark my house. Death will pass over us. She lets the men down from her window, through the wall itself, lowering them on a rope to the ground below. and the spies disappear into the hills. Their report when they return is extraordinary in its confidence. Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands. And also, all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us. Rahab is not a footnote in this story. She is a theological anchor. She represents something that will echo across the entire Bible. The truth that God's grace does not operate by the categories that human beings construct. She is not an Israelite. She is not righteous by the standard of the law. She is a woman whose whole life has been shaped by exploitation and survival. And God preserves her. More than preserves her. He honors her. Rahab will marry an Israelite. She will become the mother of Boaz. Boaz will marry Ruth. Ruth and Boaz will become the great-grandparents of King David. And David's line will produce 1,000 years later a man born in Bethlehem who will be called the Son of God. The scarlet cord hangs in the window, and the thread of hope runs all the way to the manger. 3 days after the spies return, 2 million people break camp. They pack everything. The tents come down. The livestock are gathered and counted. The carts are loaded. The elderly and the children are positioned. And the most sacred object in the nation's possession, the Ark of the Covenant, is carried out on the shoulders of the Levitical priests, wrapped in its coverings, precious and terrifying. The Ark is not simply a religious artifact. It is the throne footstool of God. It is a wooden chest overlaid with gold, carrying the tablets of the law, Aaron's rod that budded, and a jar of manna from the wilderness. On its lid, the mercy seat, 2 golden cherubim spread their wings, and between those wings, God's presence rests. When the ark moves, God moves. When the ark stops, God is there. Joshua gives the command. The priests take up the ark and lead the march. But then he tells them to keep a gap approximately 1,000 yards between the ark and the people, that you may know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. They have never done this. The gap is necessary so that everyone can see exactly where the ark is, exactly where God is, exactly what direction the divine presence is moving. In unfamiliar territory, you need to see clearly where the guide is. They move to the edge of the Jordan. The river is at flood stage. The water is high. The water is fast. The water is brown and churning and looks nothing like a crossing. And then Joshua says something that still takes the breath away. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Tomorrow, not someday, not eventually, not when conditions improve. Tomorrow. The next morning, the priests lift the ark onto their shoulders and walk toward the Jordan. And here is the moment that theologians have circled for 3,000 years. God does not split the Jordan when Joshua gives the command. God does not split the Jordan when the people begin to march. God does not split the Jordan when the ark comes close. God splits the Jordan when the feet of the priests touch the water. Think about what that moment feels like. You are a priest of God, carrying the holiest object on earth. You have been told that the river will open. You are walking toward the river. The water is not opening. You are at the bank. The water is not opening. You are stepping off the bank. Your sandal is touching the surface of the Jordan, and the water is still not open. The miracle comes at the moment of commitment, not before. When their feet touch the water, the river stops. Far upstream, at a city called Adam, approximately 18 miles to the north, the water piles up in a heap and stands there. The flow downstream empties out. The riverbed appears, wet mud, river stones, the debris of a flood. And the priests carrying the ark walk out to the middle of the dry riverbed and stand there. They don't hurry across, they stand. In the middle of the river, while 2 million people cross around them. This is one of the most psychologically significant details in the entire book of Joshua. The priests carry the ark into the river and then stop. They stand in the former riverbed while Israel passes by on both sides. Every man, woman, child, and animal who crosses the Jordan crosses within sight of the ark. Every person looks up as they pass and sees the priests, standing with the presence of God between themselves and two walls of water, held back by nothing but divine will. You don't forget a moment like that. You carry it in your body for the rest of your life. Before they complete the crossing, Joshua selects 12 men, one from each tribe, and tells them to go to the middle of the riverbed and pick up a stone, a large stone. Carry it on your shoulder. Bring it to the far bank. 12 stones from the bottom of the Jordan. 12 stones that were sitting underwater when the crossing began. 12 stones that represent 12 tribes crossing into their promise. They set up those stones at Gilgal, their first campsite west of the Jordan. And Joshua explains why. When your children ask their fathers, "What do these stones mean?" then you shall let your children know. Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. In the ancient world, before books were common, before photographs and video, monuments did the work of memory. These 12 stones would stand in the desert of Gilgal and testify to every generation that walked past them. God stopped a river. God opened a way where there was no way. God brought us through on dry ground. There is also something deeply personal happening in this moment. 40 years earlier, the generation before this one had crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. That miracle was the founding act of the nation. God was now bookending the wilderness with a second water crossing, a second parting, a second dry ground. He was telling the new generation, everything He did for your parents, He will do for you. You are not descendants of the promise. You are the promise being fulfilled. In Hebrew, the name of their camp, Gilgal, sounds like the word for rolled, because that day, God said, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." 40 years of shame, of wandering, of being the people who were afraid to enter their own land, rolled away. Done. Finished. The river is behind them. Canaan is ahead. Everything changes today. Jericho watches them come. The gates are shut. The walls are manned. The archers are in position. The king's soldiers have been awake since the Jordan stopped flowing. Since the reports came in that 2 million people were crossing on dry ground, since it became undeniable that what was happening outside the walls of Jericho was not a military maneuver, it was an act of God. They are terrified, but they do not surrender. They lock the gates and wait. Joshua, standing at Gilgal with the army arrayed behind him, receives a divine visitor. He looks up and sees a man standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua, the military commander, does not hesitate. He walks toward the figure and demands, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" The answer is not what he expects. "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come, the commander of the Lord's army." This is not an angel in the conventional sense. Bible scholars have wrestled with this figure for centuries. His answer, no, refuses to be placed in Joshua's military categories. He is not for Israel in the way that a human general is for his side. He is the Lord of the entire battlefield. He does not take sides because both sides belong to him. Joshua falls on his face immediately. He recognizes what he is looking at, and the commander gives him a battle plan. It is the strangest battle plan ever issued to a military leader in the history of warfare. March around the city, once a day for 6 days. 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horn trumpets are to walk in front of the ark. The armed guard marches ahead of the priests. The rear guard marches behind. And everyone, soldiers, priests, the entire assembly, is to be completely silent. No war cry. No shouting. No sound at all except the low, mournful blast of 7 shofars. For 6 days, on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. And when you hear a long blast on the trumpet, then shout. That is it. That is the entire battle plan. No siege engines. No scaling ladders. No tunneling operations. No arrows, no fire, no battering rams. Just walking, in silence, for 6 days. And then shouting on the 7th. What would you feel if you were one of Joshua's soldiers receiving this order? You are a fighting man. You have weapons and armor and experience. You are looking at a walled city that has been standing for 9,000 years. And your commander tells you to walk around it in silence for a week. The temptation to question is overwhelming. The military logic is completely absent. There is no tactical rationale, no historical precedent, no strategic framework into which this plan fits. This is not a battle strategy. This is an act of faith masquerading as a military operation. And that is precisely the point. Day 1. The army of Israel circles Jericho, the trumpets blow. The Ark of God is carried around the ancient walls. The people of Jericho watch from the top of their walls. And then the army returns to camp. No attack. Nothing. Day 2. Same thing. Day 3. Day 4. Day 5. Imagine what this does to the defenders of Jericho. On the first day, they are on high alert. Weapons ready, archers in position. The enemy circles and nothing happens. By day 3, some of the fear has been replaced by confusion. Why aren't they attacking? By day 5 or 6, something more dangerous than fear has set in: routine. The bizarre has become predictable. The enemy circles every day and does nothing. The defenders have been living with maximum stress and no payoff for almost a week. Their nervous systems are exhausted. Their attention is fraying. And then day 7 arrives. 7 times around. The army is marching in the early morning. Then as the sun climbs, then as the shadows change, then as the afternoon heat presses down, 7 full circles. By the 7th circuit, the army of Israel has been marching for hours. They are dusty. They are sweating. And they are vibrating with anticipation. The long blast of the trumpets comes, and Joshua shouts, "Shout! For the Lord has given you the city." 2 million voices. The walls of Jericho fall. The Bible says they fall in their place, meaning they collapse outward, flat, straight down, simultaneously. Archaeologists digging at the site of ancient Jericho in the 20th century found a layer of destruction. Dating to approximately the late Bronze Age, the mud bricks of the walls collapsed outward and formed a ramp up which an attacking force could simply walk directly into the city. The army of Israel charges straight in. They annihilate Jericho. Everything of value, silver, gold, bronze, iron, goes into the treasury of the Lord, but one woman's house stands untouched in the rubble of the collapsed wall. The scarlet cord is still in the window. The spies find Rahab, her entire household. Everyone she asked for is alive. The promise is kept. The cord, the hope held. Joshua burns Jericho to the ground and curses the man who would dare rebuild it. A curse that will be fulfilled, word for word, centuries later in the reign of King Ahab, when a man named Heel the Bethelite rebuilds Jericho and loses his firstborn son at the laying of the foundation and his youngest son at the setting of its gates. The walls of Jericho are the first lesson that Canaan will teach the nation of Israel, written in fire and fallen stone. The battle is not won by military genius. It is won by obedience to divine instruction, even when the divine instruction makes no military sense whatsoever. Somebody took something they were not supposed to take. In the smoking ruins of Jericho, while the army is collecting silver and gold and bronze for the treasury of the Lord, one man makes a different calculation. He sees a beautiful cloak from Babylon. He sees 200 shekels of silver. He sees a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels. He calculates the weight of what no one can see and the value of what no one is watching. His name is Achan, son of Carmi, tribe of Judah. He digs a hole in his tent and buries everything in the ground. Nobody saw him do it, or so he thought. The next target on Joshua's conquest list is Ai, a small city, perhaps 12,000 inhabitants, much smaller than Jericho. Joshua sends spies to assess it, and they come back relaxed. 2,000 or 3,000 men should be enough. They are confident after Jericho. Who wouldn't be? The assault force goes up to Ai. They are routed. 36 men die. 36 Israelite soldiers who woke up that morning and believed they were part of an army that could not lose are dead in the dust. The survivors flee in panic, and the heart of Israel, the Bible says this directly, melted and became as water. Joshua falls on his face before the ark of the Lord. He tears his clothes. He puts dust on his head. He lies there until evening, and his prayer is raw with confusion and grief. Alas, O Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? It is a human prayer, a desperate prayer. It sounds almost like accusation. But God does not rebuke Joshua for the prayer. God answers it. Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen and lied and put them among their own belongings. And then the terrifying sentence, I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. I will be with you no more. This is the earthquake beneath the defeat at Ai. 36 men didn't die because the army of Ai was too strong. They died because the presence of God had withdrawn from Israel, and the presence of God had withdrawn because there was hidden sin in the camp. This is the biblical concept of corporate responsibility, a principle that modern individualism struggles with, but that the ancient world understood completely. When one member of the covenant community breaks faith, the entire community is affected. Not because God is capricious, but because Israel is not a collection of individuals. It is a body. When one part of the body is sick, the whole body suffers. The next morning, Joshua calls all of Israel to present themselves before God by tribe, by clan, by household, by man. The divine process of identification works through the layers. The tribe of Judah is identified, then the clan of the Zerahites, then the household of Zabdi, then Achan son of Carmi. The net closes. Joshua speaks to Achan, and here is one of the most theologically significant moments in the book, the way he speaks to him. He says, My son, give glory to the Lord God of Israel and give praise to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me, my son. Not criminal, not traitor, not destroyer of Israel. Son, Joshua speaks to Achan like a father whose child has broken something irreplaceable and knows it, and the only thing left to do is to speak the truth and face what comes. There is compassion in the address. There is grief. Joshua is not performing justice. He is presiding over a tragedy. Achan confesses every detail. The Babylonian cloak, the silver, the gold wedge, all of it buried in the ground inside his tent with the silver underneath. They find everything exactly where he said it would be. And Achan, his sons and daughters, his animals, his tent, everything he owned, is taken to the valley of Achor and destroyed. Israel stones him and burns everything with fire. And over the ashes, they raise a great heap of stones that stands as a warning to every generation. This is the valley of Achor, the valley of trouble. This is what hidden sin costs. But even here, God is not finished. Centuries later, the prophet Hosea will say something about the valley of Achor that sounds impossible. I will give her the valley of Achor as a door of hope. The place of Israel's greatest failure in the conquest, the place of execution and ash, will become, in God's economy, a door of hope. God is always doing something with the worst moments. The sin is dealt with. The camp is clean. Now God says, go up to Ai. But this time, the battle plan is different. Not ram's horns and silence and divine collapse. This time God gives Joshua a military strategy. A genuine ambush operation. 30,000 warriors hidden in the darkness west of the city. Joshua and a smaller force approaching from the north to draw the defenders out. When the city is empty of soldiers, the hidden force rises and takes it. Joshua sends the 30,000 out in the night and then stands at the front of the main force, looking at the city as dawn breaks. He has a spear in his hand. The approach begins. The men of Ai come out to meet them, and Joshua's force does what it has been instructed to do. It runs. A feigned retreat, drawing the defenders of Ai further from the city, further from safety, further from the moment they will realize what has happened. When Joshua knows that the ambush force is in position, when the moment is right, he stretches out his spear toward the city. 30,000 men rise from their hiding places. They pour into Ai. The city is empty of defenders. They burn it. And then the men of Ai, who have been chasing Joshua's retreating force across the plain, look back and see the smoke of their own city rising into the sky. And they realize in a moment of cold, absolute terror that they are standing in a trap. Two forces close on them from both sides. There is nowhere to run. The king of Ai is captured alive. The city is completely destroyed. 12,000 dead. And Joshua's spear does not come down until the job is finished. There is a deliberate echo here for anyone reading carefully. At the battle against the Amalekites in the wilderness, Moses stood on a hill with his arms raised. When his arms were raised, Israel prevailed. When his arms dropped, Amalek prevailed. Now Joshua's raised spear serves the same function. The spear stays up. The lesson of Ai, both the defeat and the victory, is compact and piercing. The same army, the same commander, the same enemy, completely different results. The only variable was the presence of God. When the presence is absent because of hidden sin, a small city defeats a massive army. When the presence is restored, the massive army is unstoppable. It is never about the size of the army. It is always about the presence of God. After Ai, Israel moves through the Central Highlands. They build an altar at Mount Ebal. They read the entire law of Moses to the assembled nation. Every blessing, every curse, every word. They are planting themselves in the land legally, spiritually, cosmically, making the covenant public and binding. And then a group of clever men from Gibeon shows up at their camp with a proposition. The Gibeonites are worried. They have watched Jericho fall. They have heard about Ai. They know that Joshua's campaign is moving systematically through Canaan, and they know what happens to the cities in his path. So they do something audacious. They dress as if they have come from a great distance. Cracked wineskins, worn-out sandals, moldy bread, patched clothing. Everything about them says, "We traveled far to be here. We are not from your neighborhood." They approach Joshua and say, "We have come from a distant country. Please make a covenant with us." Joshua does not inquire of the Lord. This is a critical detail. He looks at the evidence. He accepts the story at face value. And he makes a peace covenant with Gibeon. 3 days later, Israel discovers that Gibeon is 4 miles away. The leaders of Israel are furious, but the oath has been made. It has been sworn in the name of the Lord, and Joshua, who could have simply ignored a treaty made under false pretenses, decides that the oath is binding. You do not dishonor the name of the Lord, not even when you were tricked into using it. The Gibeonites become servants of Israel, woodcutters and water carriers for the congregation and for the altar. A lesser outcome than they hoped for, perhaps, but they are alive. They are inside the covenant. Word spreads immediately to the other kings of Canaan. Gibeon, one of the great cities, a royal city larger than Ai, stronger than Ai, has made peace with Israel. 5 kings of the Amorites form an alliance. Adoni-Zedek of Jerusalem, Hoam of Hebron, Piram of Jarmuth, Japhia of Lachish, Debir of Eglon, 5 kings, 5 armies, and they march on Gibeon. Gibeon sends messengers to Joshua. Do not relax your hand from your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us, for all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the hill country are gathered against us. Joshua receives the message and does not deliberate. God has already spoken. Do not fear them, for I have given them into your hands. He marched all night, from Gilgal, moving upward through the Judean hills in darkness with an entire army. He arrives at Gibeon at dawn. The surprise is complete. The Amorite alliance is hammered. They break and run down the descent of Beth-horon into the valley, desperate to reach safety. And then God enters the battle directly. The sky opens and throws down great hailstones, not rain, not sleet, but stones falling from heaven with lethal force on the retreating army. More died from the hailstones than from the swords of Israel. And here is where we return to the scene that opened this entire story. The battle is going well. The enemy is broken. The killing field is littered with the dead and dying of 5 armies. But the sun is moving. The shadows are lengthening. Night is coming. And if night comes, the survivors escape. They regroup. They make new alliances, and the next campaign is harder. Joshua looks at the sky. What is happening in his mind in this moment? He is a man who has seen God stop a river. He has seen walls collapse at a shout. He has seen hail called down from heaven. He has spent 40 years in the company of a man who watched the sea split. What is impossible for a God like this? Joshua opens his mouth. Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Aijalon. He does not preface it with "if it please you." He does not phrase it as a request. He speaks with the authority of a man who has been given authority by the one who holds the stars in position. And the sun stops. The Bible says, "The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day." There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. The Lord heeded the voice of a man standing in the heat of a battlefield, covered in the dust and blood of a night march, surrounded by soldiers who are exhausted and terrified, speaks to the sky, and the sky listens. The sun stands still over Gibeon for approximately a full day. The moon holds its position over the valley of Aijalon. The Earth's rotation, the mechanism by which every civilization has ever marked the passage of time, the engine of day and night, the clock by which armies calculate their survival, hold still, and the 5 kings of the Amorites are hunted down. They are found hiding in a cave at Makkedah. They are brought out. Joshua calls his commanders forward and tells them to put their feet on the necks of the 5 kings, not as humiliation for its own sake, but as prophecy. Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and courageous. For thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight. The 5 kings are executed. 5 kings, gone. The theological freight of this miracle is enormous. In the ancient Near East, every nation had its sun god. Ra in Egypt, Shamash in Mesopotamia, Baal in Canaan. The sun was worshipped as divine, as the highest power, as the source of life and time and order. When Joshua commands the sun to stand still and it obeys, the God of Israel is not just winning a military battle. He is demonstrating his absolute sovereignty over every object of Canaanite worship. The Canaanites worship the sun. The God of Joshua commands it. There is no force in creation that stands outside the authority of the God Joshua serves. The southern campaign rolls forward with terrifying speed. Makkedah, Libnah, Lachish, Gezer, Eglon, Hebron, Debir, City, After city falls before Joshua in a single military campaign. Then the northern campaign. Hazor, the greatest city of the north, the head of all those kingdoms, a city so vast its ruins cover 200 acres, burns. Its king is executed. And then Joshua 11:23 arrives like a breath after 7 years of holding your lungs closed. Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and the land had rest from war. Rest, after 40 years of wandering. After the grief of Moses' death, after the Jordan at flood stage, after Jericho and Ai and 5 kings and the sun standing still, the land has rest. But the harder work is just beginning. Here is the part of the conquest that every children's Sunday school lesson quietly skips. Joshua 14:10 contains a number that changes everything. Caleb reminds Joshua that he was 40 years old when Moses sent the spies. And now, at the moment he is speaking, he is 85. From the crossing of the Jordan to the beginning of the land distribution, approximately 7 years have passed. 7 years of war. We speak of the conquest as if it happened in a season. The walls fell. The sun stopped. Done. But the reality of what Joshua's people lived through is something that no short narrative can fully carry. 7 years of marching, of weather, of disease, of supply lines stretched thin across difficult terrain, of soldiers watching friends die in ambushes, of nights in the field far from family, of wondering, always wondering, whether God was still with them. 7 years. The land distribution begins in Joshua 13, and this is where the book slows deliberately. After the furious pace of the conquest, the text becomes almost administrative. Borders are drawn. Tribes are assigned to territories. Towns are listed by name. Cities of refuge are established. Places where someone who accidentally killed another person could flee and receive protection from blood vengeance. This administrative detail is not filler. It is theology. God is a God of promises, and promises, to mean anything, must have specific content. When God promised Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan, the promise was not vague. A distribution of Joshua 13:21 is the documented, tribe by tribe, town by town fulfillment of a promise made 600 years earlier to a man standing under the stars. God does not forget. God is not approximate. He gives you what he said he would give you, parcel by parcel, border by border, with every subclan accounted for. The bureaucracy of the land distribution is an act of divine faithfulness rendered in ink and stone. But the distribution also reveals something the conquest narrative glossed over. Not all the land has been taken. There are pockets of Canaanite resistance still operating, cities not yet conquered, people groups still present who were supposed to be expelled. The conquest is strategically complete. No coalition of kings can threaten Israel anymore, but at the granular level, tribe by tribe, hill by hill, there is still work to be done. This tension, mission accomplished but not complete, will become the seed of every catastrophe in the book of Judges. He walks into the tent and Joshua knows immediately that the conversation is going to be uncomfortable. Caleb, son of Jephunneh, is 85 years old. He is the last surviving member of the generation that stood at Kadesh Barnea. He is one of the 2 men, Joshua and Caleb, the only 2 who looked at the walled cities of Canaan 45 years ago and said, "We can do this. Let's go up now and take the land." He is the man whose voice of faith was drowned out by the 10 spies who said we are like grasshoppers in their sight. He has been waiting 45 years for this conversation. Caleb stands before Joshua and recites the history with the precision of a man who has replayed it 10,000 times. He was 40 when Moses sent him to spy the land. He brought back a report from his whole heart. God swore that day, that the land his foot had walked on would be his inheritance. And now behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years. And now behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was in the day that Moses sent me. 85 years old. Strong as the day Moses sent him. This is not boasting. This is testimony. Caleb is declaring that God kept not only his promise about the land, but his promise about the man who would receive it. Every year in the wilderness, every tent and every campsite, every step of the 7-year conquest, God has maintained this man's body, his strength, his capacity for the fight, specifically because there is a promise waiting to be fulfilled. And then Caleb says the thing that makes him one of the most remarkable figures in all of Scripture. So now give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. The hill country. Specifically, Hebron, the city of the Anakim, the giant warriors who had terrified the 10 faithless spies 45 years earlier. These are the people who made a generation of Israelites choose 40 years of wandering over fighting. And Caleb, at 85, is asking for their mountain, not a comfortable valley, not productive farmland, not a well-established city with minimal resistance. The hardest target in the region, the place most likely to cost a man his life, the home of the people who scared Israel out of the promised land. Give me that mountain. Why would an 85-year-old man ask for the hardest assignment? Because Caleb has been carrying something for 45 years that no one else knows the full weight of. He was right. He was right when everyone said he was wrong. He looked at the same giants the 10 spies looked at, and he came to a different conclusion. Not because the giants were smaller, but because his God was bigger. And for 45 years he watched the generation that rejected his report die in the wilderness, one by one, year by year, until there was no one left who remembered Kadesh Barnea except himself and Joshua. He has not been waiting for an easy retirement. He has been waiting for his mountain. Joshua gives it to him. No hesitation, no deliberation. He blesses Caleb and gives him Hebron. And Caleb goes up to the mountain and drives out the 3 sons of Anak, Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the giant warriors who have held that mountain since before Israel was a nation. At 85, he takes the mountain. Joshua 14:14 closes Caleb's story with a single sentence that functions as an explanatory footnote to everything. Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. Wholly followed. The same phrase God used about Caleb 45 years earlier, without reservation. Without the half-trust that most believers live with, trusting God in the easy seasons and managing things themselves in the hard ones. Caleb wholly followed. And the reward for wholly following is not comfort. It is Caleb's mountain, the hardest thing, the most dangerous thing, the thing that costs everything and requires all of you. Faith is not a guarantee of ease. It is the engine of the impossible. In the tribe of Manasseh, 5 sisters stand before Joshua and the heads of Israel and make a claim that no women have made before in the history of the nation. Their names are Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They are the daughters of Zelophehad, a man who died in the wilderness, not in rebellion, not in sin, but simply died, leaving no sons. In the inheritance system of the ancient Near East, daughters did not inherit. Property passed through the male line. But these 5 women remember something. 40 years earlier, their father had brought this exact case before Moses, and Moses had brought it before God. And God had said, "The daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers." God had already spoken. The ruling already existed. And now the land is being distributed, and the name of Zelophehad is missing. His daughters are about to be erased. So they come before Eleazar the priest, before Joshua, before all the leaders, before the entire congregation. And they say simply, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers." No argument, no plea, just the word of God stated plainly. Joshua gives them their inheritance. In a culture where women's claims were structurally invisible, these 5 women invoke the direct command of God and receive what was promised. They are not asking for extraordinary rights. They are holding the text accountable to its own standard. And the leader of Israel does not dismiss them or reduce their claim. He gives it. The daughters of Zelophehad, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, Tirzah, are inscribed in the Torah, in the book of Joshua, in the fabric of Israelite legal history. They refused to be erased. And they weren't. Also in this season, something quieter happens, something that has been 400 years in the making. The bones of Joseph are buried at Shechem. Joseph, the favored son of Jacob, the dreamer who was sold into slavery by his brothers, the man who became the second most powerful ruler in Egypt, the man who, on his deathbed, made his brothers swear, "When God brings you up out of Egypt, carry my bones from here with you." That request was made approximately 400 years before this moment. 400 years of carrying bones. Through the plagues of Egypt, through the Exodus, through the Red Sea, through 40 years of wilderness wandering, through the crossing of the Jordan, through 7 years of conquest, Israel has carried the bones of Joseph. And now, in the land, at Shechem, the bones are laid to rest. 400 years, kept, carried, buried where Joseph said. The God of Israel does not forget what his people promised, and he does not forget what he promised his people. The bones of Joseph in the ground at Shechem are a theological statement about the nature of God. He is the keeper of covenants across centuries, across generations, across the death of every person who knew about the promise. 400 years and the promised lands. The army of the eastern tribes is going home. Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh had received their inheritance east of the Jordan, in the lands they had asked Moses for before the crossing. Their condition of receiving that land was clear. They must cross the Jordan with their brothers and fight in the conquest until the western tribes were settled. They had honored that agreement. 7 years. They had fought. They had not gone home early. Now Joshua dismisses them. His send-off is generous and deeply personal. He praises their faithfulness, blesses them, tells them to return to their tents with great wealth and livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, iron, and very much clothing, dividing the spoil of their enemies with their brothers. They cross the Jordan and return to their own territory. And then they build an altar, a large altar, by the Jordan, visible from both sides of the river. Word reaches the tribes of western Canaan immediately. The eastern tribes have built a rival altar. The implications are catastrophic. In the theology of Israel, there is only one place where sacrifice can be properly offered to God, the tabernacle, the central sanctuary. A second altar is not simply redundant. It is idolatry. It is the beginning of a separate religion. It is precisely the kind of corruption that God warned would destroy the nation. The congregation of Israel assembles at Shiloh to go to war against their brothers. Before the army marched, however, the western tribes do something that saves thousands of lives. They send a delegation. 10 princes, one from each tribe, plus Phinehas the priest. They cross the Jordan and confront the eastern tribes. The accusation is fierce. What is this breach of faith that you have committed against the God of Israel? Turning away from following the Lord by building yourselves an altar in rebellion against the Lord? They are not wrong to be worried. Israel's history has demonstrated repeatedly that a single act of apostasy can bring catastrophic judgment on the entire nation. And then the eastern tribes explain, the altar is not for sacrifice. It is not a rival sanctuary. It is not a declaration of independence from the worship of the Lord at Shiloh. It is a witness, a monument. They were afraid of the future. They foresaw a day, perhaps a generation from now, perhaps 2, when the western tribes, separated from them by the Jordan River, would look across the water and say, "You have no portion in the Lord." A day when the river that separates the territories would be used to deny the eastern tribes their place in the covenant community. They built the altar to testify, "We are part of Israel. We serve the same God. Do not exclude us." In Hebrew, the name they give the altar is Ed, witness. It is a witness between us and you. When Phinehas hears this explanation, his response shows why he is the man God chose for this moment. Today we know that the Lord is in our midst, because you have not committed this breach of faith against the Lord. Now you have delivered the people of Israel from the hand of the Lord. Civil war averted, not by force, but by the willingness to talk before fighting. The willingness to believe that brothers who appear to be acting wrongly might have reasons worth hearing. The Lord is the God of both sides of the river. Joshua is old. The Bible says it twice. The body that marched through the night to Gibeon, that raised a spear over the valley of Ai, that stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, that body is wearing out. He calls all Israel to him, the elders and heads, the judges and officers. They stand before him and he looks at them one final time. His farewell has two parts delivered in two separate assemblies. The first is a warning. Joshua has been around long enough to know what kills nations. It is not foreign armies. It is not economic collapse. It is not drought or disease or natural disaster. Nations that are destroyed by God's hand are destroyed because they became something God could no longer inhabit. He tells them, "You have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake, for it is the Lord your God who has fought for you." And then immediately, "Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God. For if you turn back and cling to the remnant of these nations remaining among you and make marriages with them, know for certain that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you, but they shall be a snare and a trap for you, a whip on your sides and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good ground that the Lord your God has given you." He sees it coming. He can feel it the way old soldiers feel rain in their bones before the clouds form. He has watched a generation be faithful. He does not trust what happens after faithful generations are gone. He is right to worry. The covenant renewal at Shechem is one of the most magnificent speeches in the entire Hebrew Bible. Joshua stands at the place where Abraham first entered Canaan, the place where Jacob buried his foreign gods, the place where Joseph's bones have just been laid to rest. The geographic memory of the entire covenant story is concentrated at Shechem. He recites everything. Abraham called out of Mesopotamia, Isaac, Jacob and Esau, the descent into Egypt, Moses and Aaron, the plagues, the Exodus, the Red Sea, the wilderness, the conquest. All of it in a narrative that moves from your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates to you are standing in the land that God gave you. And then he stops. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. These words will outlive Joshua by 3,000 years. They will be carved in wood and stone, painted on doorposts and canvas, quoted in 10,000 sermons and printed on 10 million plaques. But in context, they are not triumphant. They are a challenge. Joshua is essentially saying, you can choose wrong. This is a real choice with real consequences. I am telling you what I am choosing. What are you choosing? The people respond with a great declaration of loyalty. The Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. And Joshua, who has spent his entire adult life watching humans make promises they do not keep, looks at them and says something that sounds almost harsh. You are not able to serve the Lord, for He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then He will turn and do you harm and consume you. He is not trying to discourage them. He is trying to make them understand the weight of what they are saying. A casual yes to God is worse than a thoughtful no, because the casual yes eventually drifts into practical idolatry, serving the Lord on the Sabbath and serving Baal on Wednesday, splitting the devotion, hedging the bet, maintaining the appearance of covenant while the reality quietly disintegrates. Joshua does not want their words. He wants their understanding. They say it again. No, but we will serve the Lord. He takes a large stone and sets it under the oak by the sanctuary of the Lord at Shechem. And he says, Behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that He spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. A witness against us, not for us, against us. The stone does not testify that they kept the covenant. The stone testifies that they made it. If they break it, the stone remains, an indictment, a silent monument to the promise they abandoned. Joshua son of Nun dies. He is 110 years old. They bury him in the hill country of Ephraim in his own inheritance at Timnath-Serah. The man who stopped the sun is gone. Israel serves the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and throughout the lifetime of the elders who outlived Joshua, throughout the lifetime of those who had seen everything that the Lord had done for Israel, whoever had seen. What happens when the people who have seen are gone? Joshua 2:10. The verse lands like a stone into still water. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that He had done for Israel. Did not know, not did not like, not did not agree with, did not know. As if the entire history of the Exodus and the Jordan crossing and the falling walls, and the stopped sun and Caleb's mountain and the bones of Joseph, as if all of it simply evaporated, disappeared into the past, became irrelevant, became someone else's story, did not know. How does a generation forget? This is not a mystery. This is a process that works the same way in every era, in every culture, in every family. First, the witnesses die. The people who saw the Jordan part, who walked on dry ground in the riverbed, who watched hailstones fall from heaven on the armies of the 5 kings, they grow old and they die. The 12 stones at Gilgal are still there. But stones cannot testify the way a grandfather can testify. Stones do not shake with emotion when they tell the story. Stones do not cry. Second, the culture fills the vacuum. The Canaanites who were not expelled are still there. They have their gods, Baal, Asherah, the fertility cults, the temple prostitutes, the comfortable religion that makes no demands of the heart and requires only rituals rather than transformation. The Canaanite religion is the path of least resistance. It is what everyone around you does. It is woven into the marketplace and the festival calendar and the marriages that were made in defiance of Joshua's warnings. Third, the children grow up surrounded by that culture, and the stones at Gilgal become historical artifacts rather than living memorials. And one generation later, the generation that did not know is raising children who know even less. This is the announced fall of the book of Joshua. The book does not end with the death of Joshua. It ends with a sentence that is a door swinging open onto darkness. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and the elders who outlived him. And then, nothing. The book closes, but the reader feels it before the chapter ends, feels the coming of what comes next. The book of Judges opens with the question, "Who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them?" And God answers. And for a while, a short while, Israel fights. But without the unifying command of Joshua, without the clear divine mandate of the conquest, without the absolute obedience that characterized the first campaign, something begins to slip. The Canaanites are not fully expelled. There are compromises, then intermarriages, then the foreign gods of the wives and husbands who were supposed to be gone, then the altars, then the full apostasy, then the consequences. The book of Judges begins with a generation that does not know, and a God who does not change, and the most painful, repetitive, exhausting cycle in all of Scripture. Apostasy, oppression, crying out, deliverance, rest, then apostasy again. And again, and again. The warrior who stopped the sun could not stop this. No man can. The stone at Shechem is still there. The witness against them. The stone that heard all the words of the Lord that were spoken. The stone that is quiet now, waiting for the next cry to come up from the people who have forgotten again. It always comes. The cry always comes. Because even in the silence of God's patience, even in the darkness of a generation that forgot everything, even in the spiral descent of the book of Judges, the God who bent the sun is not finished. He is never finished. If this story moved you, if you've never read Joshua this way before, if you saw something in this man's faith that you didn't see in Sunday school, then you are exactly the person this channel exists for. Beyond the Verse is built for the person who wants to go deeper. Not just what the Bible says, but what it means historically, theologically, cinematically. Every word has weight. Every story has layers you haven't found yet. Subscribe now. Hit the bell, because the next chapter of this story is not comfortable. The generation that forgot everything is about to meet the consequences of forgetting. The book of Judges, arguably the darkest, strangest, most disturbing book in the Old Testament, begins with a question God has already answered and ends with a sentence that will make your blood run cold. Judges is not a story of heroes. It is a story of a people spiraling, gifted with deliverance over and over, refusing it over and over. Gideon, Samson, Jephthah, Deborah, names that sound like Sunday school and stories that read like something else entirely. The stone at Shechem is still standing. The witnesses are coming. Don't miss it.